Pressure mounts to change hotel quarantine rule as girl with Down syndrome's family speaks out. Keith Schembry's lost phone is not in police's possession, Commissioner reveals in court, and 1.5 million bees have been burned in a suspected arson attack in Gozo. All this and more on Lovin Daily. Good evening, Malta and Gozo. Jonathan Chile here, joined by Yannick Poch. Welcome to the brand new broadcast of Lovin Daily, your online portal for the latest news and analysis from the islands of Malta, Gozo, and sometimes Comino. Now, as you can see, we've officially moved to a new time slot, 5:30, no longer at 10 a.m., Monday to Friday. So definitely stay tuned for these episodes. This is a brand new chapter for us. We want to say thank you to all the viewers who have followed us for the first 400 episodes of this daily news show, and we're very excited to start this new chapter. Now, today we've got a brilliant show to kick the new show off with. We've got a special guest in the house, PN MP Jason Azzopardi, so definitely stay tuned to the end of today's episode to check out what seems to be a great interview. And let's just jump into the first topic, a story that, all of the island has been talking about and has now reached the upper echelons of Maltese political life. Opposition leader Bernard Grech has urged Malta's health authorities to update its COVID-19 travel rules, as Maltese residents traveling from dark red countries are asked to quarantine in hotels and pay €1,400 over 2 weeks. Now, this story, a lot of people have been talking about it over the last few weeks and questioning whether this is the right approach to quarantining, but it's really come to the forefront now after the story of Rachel Omana, who is the sister of social media influencer Daniel Omana. She recently traveled to Nigeria as part of a charity project, and as she's coming back, she's being asked to quarantine in a hotel for 2 weeks. Now, her mother has spoken out saying, listen, she's open to having tantrums when left alone. Her condition might not be the best to be left alone for 2 weeks in a hotel by herself. And now Bernard Grech, as well as PN MP Ryan Kalous, as well as MEP Alex Saliba, even Clyde Pooley has spoken out. PLMP Oliver Shikluna as well has spoken out, raising questions over whether this rule should be changed.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we have had a good summer. I suppose the rule is being effective to some degree. That being said, it does feel a bit excessive to make people, especially people who have their own property here in Malta, to force them to quarantine upon arrival, both from a financial perspective, because I mean, who has the money to waste? But at the same time, it just makes no sense to be away from your loved ones, from your belongings. So hopefully the appeal will be heard, and then we might have some tweaking at least to this measure. Our second story is about police Angelo Gaffa, who has told the courts that the police do not have the phone allegedly lost by former OPM Chief of Staff Keith Schembry in their possession. As many of you will remember, Schembry had told investigators that he had lost his phone when he was questioned by the police in relation to the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia back in 2019. Last month, lawyers representing the assassination's alleged mastermind, Jürgen Fenech, submitted a court application basically arguing that a constitutional case that they had filed in an attempt to get the lead investigator thrown off the case should be reopened in order for the court to hear the police's testimony about this phone. The idea obviously is to get people talking about this phone that was lost. After a back and forth, the request was accepted by Judge Lawrence Mintoff, who called on the police to submit all the evidence they had from Schembry's phone. However, Gaffa today insisted with the police that the police had not in fact managed to obtain that phone, the one we all think of when we think of Keith Schembry's phone, and explaining that the one in their possession currently was the one that he was using after that. The phone is subject to a magisterial inquiry and therefore it's not. The police aren't at liberty to just, submit it in court. And in fact, this can only be done at the discretion of the Attorney General. In fact, the Commissioner said that the decree ordering the data to be submitted should be revoked.
When the story had first emerged a year and a half ago that Keith Schembry's phone was lost, it had raised major eyebrows. Now, getting this from the Commissioner, is quite shocking. So we'll definitely have to follow the story to see what happens next and see if there is any developments on it. Moving on to the next story from the sister island of Gozo. Around 1.5 million bees were killed in a suspected arson attack over the weekend, and it's quite shocking. It seems that an unknown individual left a burning tire under the apiary, leading to 1.5 million bees being damaged or killed during this attack. Now, the owner of this apiary, Armando DeCino, said, that this was a major blow to his operation, and this is not the first time this has happened. Back in 2016, similarly, 250,000 bees had been killed in another vandalism attack. So this is very shocking. Now, Melita Bees, which is the name of the company that this man runs, specialize in the breeding of queen bees, which are essential for flora and fauna to continue being healthy, both locally and abroad. So this is a major hit to Malta's, ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line to me is kind of why take matters into your own hands and just go and burn other people's property. I can understand that maybe someone might have had an issue with this, with the bees, but at the end of the day, the solution is never for you to take the law into your own hands, especially not by killing and destroying bees like that. So on to our next story. Employers should have the right to ask their employees about their vaccination status, as well as whether they've traveled outside the country, in a bid to reduce disruption resulting from COVID-19 restrictions. The Chamber of SMEs has proposed. Proposal was put forward during a press conference this morning when the Chamber presented its proposal for Budget 2020. Among the proposals, the Chamber is suggesting that anyone choosing to travel to a dark red country, or those, for example, who choose not to get vaccinated, should not be eligible for paid quarantine leave. With the budget around the corner, it's something regular that unions and social partners all present the proposals for the budget. The Chamber has is also proposing a broadening of the middle income tax bracket. As things stand, anyone earning up to €65,000 pays a tax rate of 25%, which the Chamber is proposing increasing to €100,000. There are a number of other proposals, including, for example, setting up of a Know Your Client register to stop companies from having to duplicate lots of work. They also said they were in favour of a proposal put forward by the Nationalist Party last week for the government to step in and create a fund to help businesses cover the increasing cost of importation.
Now, you can definitely check out all of the proposals on lovinmalta.com. We have a nice article breaking everything down. But, this question of employers and their right to know what their employees are doing if they're traveling abroad, if they've been vaccinated, is, international. People in the UK are discussing it. It's a major topic as well in the USA. So I'm not surprised that it's reached the Malta shores, especially as people are now, no longer working from home, no longer working remotely. People are back in the offices, these questions are bound to happen. Moving on to the final story, a bit of a lighter story. It seems that, Malta is becoming a little bit of a mini Hollywood with so many stars and actors and actresses on the island right now. Last week, Lovin Malta had revealed that Below Deck Mediterranean, a very popular Netflix show, was actually being filmed in Malta. And now we've got quite a famous star, Tori Spelling. You might remember her from the major 90s show, Beverly Hills 90210. She's been spotted on the island, maybe in relation to Below Deck Mediterranean. We're hearing rumors that she might actually be involved in the shooting, though that has not been confirmed. So we might actually see Tori appear in a multi-shot location in the next season of Below Deck Mediterranean on Netflix.
Are you a Beverly Hills fan?
I have to admit, I've never actually seen a show, though I have, I have major memories in the 90s of, the adverts being on TV and lots of people discussing it.
Oh no, I know the name, but I have to admit, never watched it. So we're going to cut off to a small, short Vox Pop video that we did last week in Mostar, where we asked residents about Chico Fenech and what they feel about his garden, and then we'll be right back with Jason Azzopardi for our interview.
Growing up in Mostar, I remember seeing Chico Fenech's infamous green Land Rover parked all over the streets, with news that his property is set to be developed into a public garden and that infamous Land Rover is set to be restored. Lovin Malta hit the streets to ask, what does Mostar think about Chico Fenech's garden? X'taħseb fuq iġnien ta' Chico Fenech kemm wara? Għandha tiġi restaurata?
Flok la jimitluqa, nifhem li għandha tiġi restaurata jien.
Naħseb għal-ġid tal-poplu jiebu. Mela le?
Why not?
Nix minn hawn jentom ma qaslu fejn għalfejn qed tgħidli.
Chico Fenech kien jaf l-iskola. Għax kien maħija. Kien diġà qed Form 4 u kien bravu.
They should, no?
Naħseb sabiħ jien.
Iva,
Għala?
ix hemm nuqqas ta' dawn l-affarijiet.
Dejjem jiġri bil-van, bil-klib, it-triq għalli hija tiegħu.
If you touch his fields, you have a problem.
But apart from that, he was a nice guy?
Oh, very nice.
So the people of Mosta have spoken. Clearly they think that the land should be put to good use and not wasted. However, the topic of Chico Fenwick is still very fresh in their minds. Many of the older generation have lots to say about him, those who loved him and those who hated him. Let's keep asking some more.
Ifhem, ma kellux dawk l-standard ta' bħalna bħallum, fim? U d-gerfex naqraw.
Għanna problema għal parking. Jek se jagħmlu public garden, allura se jiġi iktar too crowded ħabba il-parkis.
U l-Land Rover tiegħu għandha tiġi monument, xi ħaġa ikonika?
Xejn, how can treat Land Rovers?
Le, monument, le, ma jirrestawra u miex idea ħażina laqqas.
Kif rajta jien imreda wis mhux worth it.
Ma kienx raġa l-ħażinta. Imma mbagħad min jittantaħ stamel.
Bis-seta dakka jekk jgħidtaw tiegħi jiġi tiegħu dak. Gangster dak kien.
L-art kien jaħdimha u jekk konti tolbu ġidra jew tidan itilek.
Yo, I'm not gonna lie, I am getting Chico Fenwick vibes right now.
Kieku titpoġġa hemmhekk tibqa' tifkira tiegħu.
Iktar minn wieħed kellu dak. Astara minn ġofi dik bit-bimbalasti kellu.
Restaurata.
Why should there be a memory? He's not a famous person. He's an infamous person, in my opinion.
So the people of Mosta have spoken, and it seems that on the whole, they're okay with Chico Fenwick's property being turned into a public garden, though they're a bit unsure of what should happen to the Jeep, and the jury is still out on how history will judge the legacy of Chico Fenwick. Let us know in the comments below what you think about the garden and whether you had any encounters with Chico Fenwick. Until next time, it has been Jonathan Chilia from Lovin Daily.
Welcome back to Lovin Daily. We're here with Nationalist MP and Caruana Galizia family lawyer Jason Azzopardi. Jason, thank you very much for
thanks for the invite.
For agreeing to be here.
Thank you.
So I want to start off with some questions about you are the spokesperson for enterprise for the party, and I will move on to other things. So recently you proposed the setting up of a €40 million fund to help businesses with sort of importation costs. Why have you proposed this?
It was last Friday, and first of all, I'm very glad, very humbled on behalf of the party, not just myself and the cluster group of which I form part, which was set up almost a year and a half ago now, dealing with industry, number of clusters. The beauty about these clusters is that many of the people taking part are not politicians. Candidates, MPs are the minority. The majority are people from all walks of life, some of whom have never set foot before inside the Nationalist Party headquarters. Now, cut a long story short, I was tasked and asked by the leader of the opposition last, when was it? January. I was entrusted with the portfolio for industry, amongst other subjects, and I started meeting the stakeholders, and what came out immediately was the major concern that practically all of them have the added, when I say added, we're speaking of a huge amount, extra costs compared to their competitors on the mainland. Why? Because whatever they have to import, whatever they have to export, is practically via the sea. So that means ships. That means added costs. Anyway, so just a small statistic. The World Bank has very recently, I would say a couple of years ago, there was a study which found that whereas the Belgian entrepreneur has just 2% transportation costs, the Italian has 6%, the Maltese has almost 20%. So that means added costs, and that means added on to the consumer. That means increased cost of living. So what did we do? We studied, we heard them out, we listened, we studied, we researched, and then last Friday we came out with the number of proposals, not just one, to be fair, but the main one, and this is something that the Malta Employers Association, the Chamber of Commerce and the Chamber of SMEs, even today, this afternoon, supported publicly, saying, listen, the party is committing itself, the Nationalist Party, to set up a national fund for €40 million. Why 40? Just out of thin air? No. 40 is more or less the amount of money the Maltese entrepreneurs, the Maltese industry, which employs around about 22,500 families directly, because indirectly even more. I won't mention the name, but there's a particular large company which employs 1,000 employees in Malta. It has more than 30 subcontractors, all of whom are very small, all of which are very small companies employing less than 12 people. So, bottom line, fund. We called upon government, because I will reiterate here, this is not a partisan matter. And God forbid it becomes partisan, bogged down into the cursed partisan political divide. There's the industry at stake, the competitiveness of the industry. I mean, we believe that the Maltese industrialist is on a par as far as his capacity, as far as his courage, as far as his vision is concerned, with any other entrepreneur. However, this disadvantage, this what the European calls the European Union law refers to as a systematic handicap, a permanent handicap. Why handicap? Because you're permanently surrounded by the sea. We're the island state, outermost region on the periphery of Europe. So we proposed this. At the same time, we said, listen, we do know that this requires state aid approval from the European Commission. So we called upon government, and I did again this afternoon. Let's call upon government. Together, we're ready. We want to change this, change it for the better. Together, we convince the European Union, chapter and verse we can quote. And we get an exemption for the industry to be helped on an annual basis. And that will mean less cost of living increases, so much more money left in the pockets of the Maltese consumer. Secondly, attracting new industry to Malta. Thirdly, securing the 22,000 plus jobs already in the industry.
Another proposal that was actually raised today by the Chamber of SMEs is for employers, in fact we mentioned it during the headlines, for employers to be able to ask employees whether they've gotten vaccinated, whether they've travelled. Now as things stand, this is it's personal data, it's something you can't as the spokesperson for industry and enterprise, would you support a proposal like this?
I'm aware that this is a very contentious, sensitive, delicate matter. There is not just the chamber which has pronounced itself. I'm aware that there's another stakeholder some weeks back which has spoken about this issue, which, as you said, impinges directly on sensitive personal data. So let's not rush. Let's be careful. Yes, the employer do have rights, of course, but the employees do have rights as well. And let's be very careful not to go all guns blazing with a shotgun approach. This requires serious discussion at all levels, and especially at MCESD level, for all the stakeholders to be on board. Because God forbid we get this wrong. As you rightly pointed out in your news just a few minutes ago, it's a bone of contention in many other countries around the world. So we're not inventing the wheel over here. I do believe that there is scope for a reasonable discussion, but definitely I wouldn't want to say let's go in this direction or in that direction before making sure that the rights and obligations of employers and employees, they are two faces of the facets of the same coin, are safeguarded.
Another issue that's going to be, I guess, quite important in the budget and in the year to come is the country's grey listing. So we keep hearing about difficulties being encountered by businesses, especially when it comes to banking. Realistically, is it possible for us to get off the grey list without actually having stifling economic growth, in the sense that, but without placing more burdens? Is it wishful thinking that we somehow think that we can continue to grow?
What is wishful thinking is somebody saying and trying to hoodwink the people that with the present government which has led us onto the grey list because of the impunity, and I will explain why, practical examples. We can get off the grey list. That is why Bernard Gregg is so correct when he said that within 3 months of a new nationalist government being elected, we will get off the grey list, because that is a message being sent to us. The same happened in 1987. When Fenech Adami was elected for the first time in 1987, probably many of your viewers were not even born yet in 1987. But anyway, but it was a message. It was a message. And the reason why Bush and Gorbachev could host their historic summit in 1989 in Malta was because the change of direction in 1987 as a result of a nationalist party victory after 16 years of an oppressive government, a socialist government. Now, the same thing here. This government is ensuring the impunity of Konrad Mizzi. Let's be practical about it. Does somebody believe that the United States, which is a main player within the FATF, not the only one, but the main player, the biggest one, right, will accept Malta being taken off the grey list when you have major arrests, and not just arrests, for goodness sake? They need convictions.
But are you saying they need specific names? So is it like Konrad Mizzi specifically?
Course. I mean, I've said it in Parliament and I said it elsewhere and I wrote it. I mean, I do know and have stated that the US government will never concede Malta being taken off the grey list until certain individuals, especially PEPs, chief amongst which Konrad Mizzi, are arraigned in court and convicted. And this is very important to send this message. What the FATF and what the other bodies, international bodies, want to see, it's not just the number of people being arraigned increasing, but the number of convictions. They will not be impressed about the number. It's not a question of quantity, but this is a question of convictions. Now we have Konrad Mizzi still lurking, running around and still a member of parliament, and he's a very corrupt person. He's the most corrupt politician ever to set foot in parliament. I said it publicly. He never sued me, and I challenged him to sue me. He never did. Of course, he cannot, because it's true. You have other PEPs. You have, for instance, magisterial inquiries still pending because the police, let's say, for example, Pilatus, just today we read that the police are not looking at the account holders of Pilatus Bank. Crazy. Pilatus Bank. The arrests that should have taken place even abroad. International arrest warrants were signed by the magistrate last March. John Daly, for instance. I will not enter into the merits of the case, for goodness sake. Now, the case is going to be heard later on this week. Justice will take its course. But, allow me this. People do have a right to know. And foreign bodies want to know who's going to assume responsibility for an obscene, corrupt decision. Corrupt in the sense, morally corrupt, right? Legally corrupt. John Daly should have been arraigned March 2013, the very first decision that Joseph Muscat took, the most important decision, the removal of John Rizzo as police commissioner. Why? Because John Rizzo is no nonsense. He doesn't look anyone in the face, right? And substituted with a puppet, a new police commissioner, who the very first thing he did was to invite John Daly over for a coffee, Taparsi. It should have been an interrogation, and he decided that there are no further grounds to prosecute. Going against a detailed, several pages long memo, which was drafted in December 2012 by Angelo Gaffa, then police inspector, Michael Kassar, then assistant commissioner, and Kakia, deputy commissioner of police, detailing why this guy should have been arrested and arraigned. Now, who's going to carry the can for these lost years? Because justice, impunity. This is the leitmotif. Impunity. That is why we were grey-listed.
But to a certain extent, isn't it the case that maybe even foreign observers might be looking at the country and saying, okay, maybe the cases seem worse now, but in reality, there is a cultural issue, there is a history of certain corruption, direct orders. We've heard this even in the past with national administrations. No. Do you think it's enough that there's just a change in party, or are they just looking at us now thinking they're all the same?
The change in party will bring about a change in the culture of impunity. Does somebody think, I mean, for a split of a second, that a nationalist party in government will condone having a chief of staff in the office of the Prime Minister helping a major criminal evade justice in the assassination of a journalist? A chief of staff in the office of the Prime Minister setting up a secret company in Panama 48 hours after taking office. A minister doing the same. And the Prime Minister, Joseph Muscat, condoning, looking the other way, defending, justifying. And so this is completely unheard of. I mean, tell me, listen, let's be frank. You are telling me that there was never any corruption in the past? Definitely not. I mean, since time immemorial, corruption has existed. But what is different is state-sponsored corruption, never until 2013. Politicians being shielded from prosecution by the state-captured institutions, never. That is what is different. The corruption has been institutionalized. That is what is different. That is why we need a change in this way of doing things.
You mentioned the Daphne Caruana Galizia murder case, and you're obviously the Caruana Galizia family lawyer. In the past, you have mentioned, for example, that the election date was set with the assassination in mind, and various other claims, suggesting that Joseph Muscat and or Keith Schembri were aware beforehand. Is this something you still claim to be true, that they knew of the murder beforehand, or did they just try?
Joseph Muscat was aware that something was coming up. I said it in Parliament, and I have no reason to believe otherwise. What is true? But let me clarify and explain why. I am not the only lawyer for the Caruana Galizia family, together with Dr. Therese Comodini Kakia, whom I salute. We were present and we assisted the family during the course of the several months-long public inquiry sittings, which report came out at the end of July. This week will be the 7th week from when Roberta Bella just put the report in the closet or in a drawer and hid it absolutely zilch, when we desperately need protection for journalists, desperately, to ensure journalists are safeguarded and not receiving slap lawsuits like the one I got personally last week from the Bulgarian owner of Satabank. But ignore me. The important thing is the journalists, because they are what we need to make sure that the truth comes out. Now, coming back to the public inquiry. There was a particular sitting where Keith Schembri was testifying in the public inquiry. If I remember correctly, it was February of this year. It was early, the first part of this year. And I asked Schembri about the reason for calling the election. As you know, as everybody knows, the mantra of the Labour Party, of Joseph Muscat, of One TV, etc., was always he had to call the June 2017 election because of the instability caused by Daphne because of E-Grant. That was the mantra, that is the mantra. And probably if you do a vox pop amongst the audience of One TV news, I would say 90% would definitely come up with that explanation, which was fed down their throats for several months. But that is a lie, an obscene lie. Why? Daphne released the story on E-Grant on the 20th of April, 2017. I asked Keith Schembri when he was testifying about this. And I showed why, as early as February 2017, now remember, the election was called on the 1st of May. As early as February 2017, as Daphne had already indicated in her writings, the decision to go for an early election had been already taken. And I asked Mr. Schembri on the witness stand about this. And he replied in a very straightforward tone, I never said that the election was called because of E-Grant. I told him But the Prime Minister and your party and your government always repeated that. And he replied, but you're asking me. I never said that. Definitely the election was decided by February 2017. That moment, Keith Cambry demolished immediately all the lies, all this propaganda about Egrand being the cause or Daphne being the cause for an early election.
But you're saying they didn't
so in February 2017, something must have happened. And don't forget, now I will tell you what happened in February 2017. As Matthew Caruana Galizia testified in court and released interviews several times, as early as February, his mother, Daphne, had already started working because she was in touch with a whistleblower from within or associated with Electrogas. A huge amount of data was leaked to her. When I say huge, more than 100,000 documents from within Electrogas. That is why she asked Matthew to come over and help her, assist her with this work. But she was the one dealing with this. Electrogas, as early as February, knew there was this major leak. Yeah. And so let's think why Joseph Muscat in February 2017 had already decided to go for an early election. I mean, let's be blunt about it. The polls were showing the Labour Party was ahead. Trust rating of Joseph Muscat, far ahead. There was no threat to his popularity as Prime Minister or to the popularity of the Labour Party. So why bring the election so early, more than a year early than it was scheduled? And we know, when I say we, because you're one of the best court reporters that follows the compilation of evidence, etc. We know, I won't go into it over here for reasons of time, but the people know. What did Melvin Teuma say? What happened around that time as far as the order to kill Daphne was concerned? Remember, now join the dots. And what is the reasonable conclusion one can arrive there? So I do yearn, it's not just me, this country needs, as Daphne's family stated this afternoon, or late this morning after the visit, it was positive at last. The President of the Republic paying his respects and visiting the site where Daphne was assassinated. At long last, Mr. President, it was the right thing to do. And it was positive. It was very, very somber and the right thing to do. It should have been done months ago. But as the family stated in its statement in the afternoon, this nation needs healing. It needs healing. And for it to be healed, that wound to heal and not let it fester, the truth needs to come out. Unless truth comes out, the full truth.
Do you think it will?
Yes, it will, of course.
So how do you...
Full justice will not take. That is why we need the full truth. And that is what the family, the lawyers assisting the family, civil society. I salute Repubblica. Now the #1 anti-mafia organization in Malta. Together with the opposition. Yes, we will continue to strive, to seek, to achieve full justice. My sincere hope as a Maltese, forget that I'm a Nationalist Party politician, as a Maltese, don't we deserve a Labour Party which apologizes for those years, more than 30 years of dehumanizing Daphne, demonizing Daphne, is-saħħara tal-bidnija, all sorts of half-creature-like cartoons and whatever on the trolls controlled by the Labour Party. For many years, I remember something that hurt me and hurt the family and hurt civil society activists. There was a particular occasion during a particular vigil at Bidnija. It was early days after the assassination. And I remember, in fact the media had reported this, a car speeding by. There were people inside this car who shouted and made certain noises mimicking an explosion. ghastly. I mean, how can somebody reach that amount of being so inhumane? But that is the result of more than 30 years. Definitely being portrayed as the enemy of the people. I'll just share this and I'll stop because I have a tendency to speak at length, so I apologize. Recently I reread a very, very short book which I had read when we were at school. The Enemy of the People. I suggest to whoever is following. Written by Henry Ibsen, the Norwegian playwright. The Enemy of the People. He is considered, character, Dr. Stockman, is considered to be an enemy of the people because he was speaking the truth about the state of the baths in this particular small town in Norway. That is what Daphne was portrayed, and that is why what led to her being isolated from everyone, and that is what made her assassination possible.
So Jürgen Fenech has now been indicted for the murder, and sort of we're going to have a trial soon. Many people have been saying, the trial should be broadcast live, online or on TV, the way it is abroad. Would you agree with a statement like that? Is it time?
I will reply not with reference to this particular case.
Okay, fair enough.
In general. I personally, now I'm speaking in a personal, private capacity as a practicing lawyer. There are cases, or rather, there are sittings in front of particular courts, for instance, the Constitutional Court, the highest court of the land. Let's say the Court of Criminal Appeal, deciding appeals from a trial by jury. Those for sure can lend themselves to being streamed live. I remember when I was still at university first year, I think it was 1988, 1989, was the famous trial of O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
O.J. Simpson. And I remember learning a lot, like many other students, I would suppose, this daily streaming on CNN, I remember, of this trial by jury. Why not? Why not? But I wouldn't tag it to a particular case, because that's not just. What is important is the particular court. Why not trial by juries of a certain gravity, where the charges of a particular character, but especially the Constitutional Court, where points affecting or impinging on the constitutionality of a law or the breach of fundamental human rights, those will definitely, in my opinion, lend themselves to being streamed. Yes.
So the country recently has experienced this massive disinformation campaign. Media outlets have been targeted. You have in one
today
again as well. So in one particular post, you had said that you hinted at being aware of the identity of who was doing this. And could you elaborate a bit on this? What are you suggesting it's linked to the case?
Mela, I will not reveal what I said to the
police commissioner,
police investigators.
Okay.
What I can say is this. Number one, the timing when the spoof emails started, the timing when the spoof websites started appearing, the timing of many anonymous calls which I myself, Manuel Delia, and some journalists are receiving almost every night, incessantly. I don't repeat, maybe it's the first time I'm saying this publicly, but yes, myself and Manuel Delia, because I asked him and he asked me, we established that several anonymous calls which we are receiving late at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, have a particular comment rate. And I can say that some in particular, where the language used was Maltese, by the way, very clearly Maltese, In one particular or two particular calls, I was being there was a play going on Manuel Delia's address during a Repubblica vigil where he was criticizing the impunity which led to Daphne's assassination. Anyway, so when you see the timing, when they appeared, the emails and the spook and the fake websites and several other instances which I will not reveal here but indicative, both myself and the people who are receiving these or we are at the receiving end, we have passed on to the police. So back to your question, I will answer your question this way. What is the leitmotif? What is the underlying theme underpinning the emails, the websites, the anonymous calls? It's one. Those who, in some way or another, are associated with the work being done for justice to take place in Daphne's assassination.
So a couple of more questions for wrap up. In another post they had uploaded, you had sort of made reference to Freemasonry in relation to the case. It was quite a cryptic post.
Of course.
Could you elaborate a bit on that?
There's no doubt that Freemasonry over the last few years after the Labour Party was elected was emboldened, and it spread much further its wings and its roots. Okay. There are many indications and facts showing this, especially when you see certain things which go beyond a certain particular field and anyway I won't. But definitely in the near future I am quite optimistic that news will come out further showing the octopus, il-arnita. The Italians call it la piovra, right? We have our own version. And Freemasonry is a form of, yes, la piovra, where the be-all and the end-all is money at all costs and power at all costs, no matter what, no matter who. When you see certain attacks being coordinated by people from supposedly different backgrounds, different teams, different areas, I won't be more specific for obvious reasons, then you know that there's a common hand.
So even in the happenings surrounding this case, it's saying there is this one last question. So we're rumored to be sort of going into an election soon in November. Do you think that we are actually going to have an election? And also yesterday we saw Patrick Daly criticize One News for not covering the issue of the portrait of Joseph Muscat. Does it seem that Robert Abela is trying to distance himself from Muscat, or is it as the pianist saying that he's his puppet?
No, Robert Abela cannot distance himself from Joseph Muscat for a very simple reason, and I stated publicly with a big sense of responsibility. Robert Abela is there because Joseph Muscat wanted him there. Not only Joseph Muscat did not want Chris Fearn, Jürgen Fenech also did not want Chris Fearn to become leader of the Labour Party and therefore Prime Minister in January, January 2020. Right? The months before January 2020, Joseph Muscat and Jürgen Fenech and a couple of other people were the adamant in not having Chris Fearn being elected. Question: why? I've asked this question several times publicly, and I will say it also now. Is it true that Joseph Muscat in January 2020 asked Chris Fearn to give him a certain guarantee, and Chris Fearn was not ready to give that guarantee? And that is the moment when Joseph Muscat decided to start lobbying, canvassing with his wife all out for Roberta Bella. So Roberta Bella can never distance himself because he knows, and Joseph Muscat has sent him a very, very, very clear message in the interview he did with the Sunday Times some weeks ago. You're there because I made you there, I put you there, so beware. Whenever I want, I can remove you. November election or not, definitely it's quite close. Whether it will be in November or not, I still think there is a big probability, yes, that the election will be in November. But beyond this, whether it's because we're not in the business of reading the crystal balls here, but people should ask, if the election is indeed held in November, why? What is the Prime Minister afraid of that could be coming out? I can surmise, and I'm pretty sure what he knows.
What do you think it is?
That and it's related to court work. What will come out over the next few months, let's say, which will negatively affect the Labour Party in government. But beyond this, you mentioned a very good point about Patrick Daly criticising one. I won't go into this particular incident, but except to say this. The Labour Party is riven and driven with internal rifts. Take Gozo. You have 3 ministers trying to trip each other all the time. They're not even on speaking terms. Does somebody speak about this fact? 3 ministers trying to trip one another. When you see about the marina in Marsa Scala, Ian Borch throwing the stone and then hiding his hand. You see Aaron Farrugia, the defense he did. And where's Roberta Bella? In this, silence. I mean, the Labour Party, for instance, you had Jean-Claude Bicallev, the Labour Member of Parliament, being called a clown by the Labour Mayor of Marsa Scala. The Labour Party is full of these internal conflicts. I mean, I will repeat, but this is so serious. Can somebody who is listening tell me what was the reason for Joseph Muscat and Jürgen Fenech to make it at all costs, to make sure, and that is the word that was used, at all costs, Chris Fern not to become leader? Why? What could have happened had Fern become Prime Minister? What guarantee did Joseph Muscat exact or demand, which he was not ready to give Fern? And so Roberta Bella won the contest. So, bottom line, I'll end this on this note. I believe that this country requires a major shift, a major change in direction for the better. I believe that there is so much we can do to treasure and bolster the common good. Note, not once since 2013, in no speech, whether it's in Parliament, whether it's a ministerial activity, whether it's a Labour Party activity, not once have they ever mentioned the phrase common good. Because it's not in their forma mentis, in their psyche. What they have is power and money for the Tal-Alba, for the friends of friends. I mean, unprecedented abuse of the direct order. Yes, direct orders you mentioned, they were there since time immemorial, but never abused in this way. I mean, vote buying galore, glaring. That is why we need the public inquiry report, its recommendations to be implemented. Why, Prime Minister? 7 weeks have passed. 7 weeks. Don't the journalists deserve peace of mind? Legislation, not because I have proposed it twice and the government voted against or refused to debate, to defend journalists against slap. But for goodness sake, can't we agree that it is wrong for somebody who is rich, who is corrupt, who is criminal, files a case against Daphne Caruana Galizia for 40 million in Arizona, Pilatus Bank, right? For trying to sue David Kaz and Manuel Delia in London for I don't know how many millions, I think 70 million. For Henley and Partners to threaten me and Daphne and the emails between Owen Bonnici, Joseph Muscat, Keith Cambry and Jonathan Cardona conspiring to sue Daphne and Jason Azzopardi because of our criticism of the sale of passports. I mean, the public inquiry went into all this and much more. Can't you agree, Prime Minister, that this requires a resolve that as soon as Parliament convenes, soon, 3rd of October, let's get going. As far as the Nationalist Party is concerned, our mind is very clear. I mean, we have proposed even private members' bill, which anticipated certain aspects of the report. But this is my final appeal. You're a journalist and I thank you, and I didn't know I made some history here because it's the first time, 5:30 p.m. I hope I brought you some reasonable amount of viewership. Pero, journalists need protection. This is serious. I will not accept, and I will never be able to accept, living in a country where my journalists, even those whom I disagree with, cannot publish what they have researched because they are being threatened by multi-million lawsuits by corrupt criminals abroad. That is absolutely not on. That is at least the least we can do to defend our journalists, and not to denigrate them, and not to subject them to character assassinations like certain areas of the media controlled by the Labour Party do. That is very wrong, very dangerous. See what led to Daphne's assassination. Daphne was assassinated because she was isolated. She was isolated, she was vulnerable. Vulnerable, she was eliminated. We can never have that being repeated. The country cannot afford it. This country needs healing.
Jason Azzopardi, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
So that's it from us tonight. Tune in tomorrow at the same time and have an evening full of lovin'.